questions for this panel?
Just making sure we're in the right place.
So this is a question for Simon.
Yeah.
Well, question or a comment. People will see the conclusion that you can train to recognize hypoxia, and they will ignore the recommendation not to do that training. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that it's not a reason not to do science. We want the truth. And despite the fact that that practice is widespread in aviation, I can promise you that there was no proof in the literature that it actually worked. That study is the first one that suggests it works. Look, all we can do, Mark, is make it very clear in the published paper that this is unsafe to do at home. And, I think there's lots of things we tell rebreather divers that are unsafe, and in general, they follow the instructor's advice. So if instructors do their job and make it very clear that this is not something that you should be doing, it's not. Look, in the military, in a medically supervised scenario, yeah, probably for properly selected people, it probably is something you can do, but not on a dive course and not at home. And we just have to advocate for that.
Yeah, Simon, so really interesting. And so being a multidiscipline diver, so mixed gas rebreather to free diving, as free divers, we train CO2 and O2 tolerance tables, series of breathe, hold, 8 different times in variations that have us working in a ever-increasing CO2 environment or a decreasing oxygen environment. Yeah. I'd be really interested to see how a trained and practicing freediver would do in your same test. From a hypercapnia point of view, we can handle a lot more CO2, but we're exposed to it in our training, so I'm wondering if we could recognize it earlier, or because we're attuned to working in a higher CO2 environment, would we just simply handle more before we'd recognize it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in fact, when we published this paper and you read it, Kirk, you'll see that we excluded free divers from the study. Like anyone who was a free diver, we excluded them for exactly that reason, because we thought that they could bias the results. However, we've thought of bringing a group of free divers in and actually testing them against a control group of non-free divers to see if the free diving training, because effectively you are doing both, aren't you? It's open label and they're experiencing hypoxia and they're experiencing high levels of CO2. So it may well be that free diver training does the same thing. Yeah, well, it probably is, and one of our junior docs is very keen to do that study, now that we've got a protocol for the study, yeah.
Leigh, you're talking about this one ship, I believe it was the Baron Erskine?
Yeah.
You said nobody knew where it was, nobody knew what happened. Did you actually go out to find that specific ship, or did you go to a shipwreck that was on the map and then find out it was that one?
We go to a shipwreck on the map. When we go down, we have absolutely no idea what it is. And then we find out what it is. And we do the research afterwards. Technology is so good now, sometimes I'm barely out of my dry suit before the people that are up before me are in the wheelhouse and are on the internet and have found out the name of that shipwreck. That's how good it is now. Years ago, it used to take us months through the archives in London. But yeah, we find out. And we can look at historic records and find out exactly what happened to that ship through German logs, things like that. So we don't know, but it's great fun being a detective. Thank you.
Jill's got a question.
I know it's not very scientific, but do you have any anecdotal things to share with us about the people that didn't bail out? Like, afterwards? Did they say, oh yeah, I was feeling that, but I didn't think it was anything? Or
Yeah, occasionally. Well, one of the issues, Jill, was we didn't actually tell them at the time, so we didn't unblind them until quite some time after the second round of dives, for various reasons which I won't dig into. What I will say is that one of the astonishing things in that earlier study, the CO2 study, where we were trying to see whether they could recognize a faulty scrubber, was that like the 25% of people that did not bail out despite no scrubber at all, some of them were obviously short of breath and sweaty, and yet they still didn't seem to appreciate what was happening to them. They got to the end of that pre-breathe and they said, oh no, I think I feel okay. You know, it was like really weird. And this is something that, you know, has cropped up in the medical literature from time to time, that people just don't recognize hypercapnia very well. But anyway, our data suggests that you can teach it, and there's at least a small training effect, and it should be relatively safe to do so. So, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hello there. So this is a question for each of you as rebreather divers. If I recall correctly, one of the conclusions from the Rebreather Forum, the Malta Rebreather Forum organized by Dive Europe, among others, was that rebreather diving was much more dangerous than open circuit. I don't know if the number was 5 to 10 times more dangerous. And yet, you are all diving rebreathers. My question would be, in light of the rising prices of helium, and in spite of these numbers, do you recommend the general public, the diving community, to progress into rebreather diving? Yes, no, or why?
Why don't you answer that, Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good question, and I think it's quite a common question that many people ask. So what I can say is that I think this is a trend when new technologies enter the market, like when the very first dive computers were entered into the market, that at least initially there are more accidents until people learn how to use the new technology, etc. With the rebreathers, I can give you like my personal perspective, and I would like to link to the presentations of Garrett and Phil. Like you need to practice, like Phil said, because that's very important. Probably more important with a rebreather than with an open circuit gear. So the question was, would you recommend all divers to go rebreather diving instead of open circuit? It depends on how much effort you're willing to put into learning. That's my reply.
I have a question for you, Laura. Sorry, I will give you the microphone after this. Okay, it's something that we usually, it's not important, blah, 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 but the fact is there is a Human Divers Hall of Fame and there is not a Men Divers Hall of Fame. So there is a gender issue. Either we want it or we don't want it, but there is. So the question I would like to ask you, because of the work that you are doing, and I'm not talking only about the then Europe and then Europe Foundation, but everything that you do you feel that anyway, when you are doing that type of work, that there are some differences, for example, from Simon going somewhere into doing scuba dive, going deep to diving or shipwreck, or the incredible things that Leigh are doing? Do you feel that there's a different treatment because you are a woman, or do you think it's the same?
No. Again, I have to talk about my personal experience, right? I have to say, I never felt like being treated differently from men, apart maybe from one time. I will quickly tell this story. So once we were searching for a wreck, and we got lost at sea, close to Siracusa in Sicily. And so we surfaced, and it was in the middle of the night, and we could see the shore from far away, like the lights. So we started swimming, and we swam for like, I don't know, 2 hours, 1 hour and a half. And then finally, some fishing boats came close to us, and they thought we were like pirates or spies, or I don't know. So they didn't want to rescue us. And then they saw that I was a woman, and they were like, okay, so we are only going to take her to the harbor. And that's what they did, actually. So I was like allowed to go on the boat, and they brought me to the harbor, and then I went to the dive center, and we recovered the others. So, yeah.
It's a great story.
Leigh, I have a question for Leigh.
Where are we? Oh, there you are.
Right here.
I've got a question after you, actually, if that's okay. No, you go.
Do you have any advice with retrieving artifacts and dealing with receiver of wreck or any of the laws pertaining to England?
Okay, yeah, that's something that I didn't really have time to talk about, but when you recover an artifact, there's laws and regulations of what we have to do. So when we recover an artifact, we have to declare it to the receiver of wreck, which is a government department. Okay, normally the government departments are interested in something that is of historical importance to the state or of a health and safety issue. But normally, those artifacts are given to you in lieu of salvage, and it's your job to look after that. Personally, when I recover and restore an artifact, and they are donated to museums, I go through a process which is kind of like an archaeological process. Although I'm not an archaeological person, the simplest way, I put everything in rainwater for about 6 months to deacidize it, to stabilize it, yeah. So it's a long old process, but we don't get into the habit of lifting too many artifacts, just something that's going to identify the wreck. And if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to identify the wreck. Orlando, can I ask a question? Okay.
Leigh, following your issue, shouldn't you have your team an underwater archaeologist? Because most of the wrecks you've been diving are already under the UNESCO Convention, historical wrecks. And also, if there's no museum that wants to receive the objects, what will you do? Because at that situation, no one else will see except for your team. So the issue that you raise the objects so everybody can see, if you hide them again, it's the same problem.
It's a massive debate, and one that will never be, an argument that never be won. The picture I showed of that bell in the sand, that perhaps cannot be seen. That's gone forever. Yet if it was brought up, it would be in a museum for everybody, generations to see. Okay? So it's a tough argument to answer the question. Yes, we're not archaeologists, but what do archaeologists do? Try to learn from the past that we don't know. But on a ship that was sank in the war, we've got much more information about what happened in that period of time and that ship. So I think the balance of whether it's an archaeological ship or not is kind of tight. The next generation, yes, those ships will be of an archaeological type, won't they? I think they should all be in museums, but if they're not in museums, the receiver of wreck should have a catalogue of who's got what and where it is. Have we got time for one more question?
Go on, Leigh.
So I've got a question for Simon, me. So you've done these tests, and you get to a point where the person, in theory, is underwater, okay? Say 100 meters deep, and they get the onset of hypercapnia or CO2 onset or whatever. We saw the video of the man that just collapsed.
That was hypoxia.
Okay, yeah. So it would be interesting to know if there's any tests where, because bailing out is quite a stressful and probably prolonged activity, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got find that regulator wherever it is, bail out to open circuit. Your first breath is pretty much water. You've got to deal with that. It'd be interesting to know if people, your symptoms that you showed, get to a stage where they physically can't deal with that process of bailing out.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, it's a great question. Well, first of all, you could buy a BOV, so it's and that was the outcome in our study. So that they had a mouthpiece with a BOV, so that the act of bailing out was just to do that in the study. But your point has actually played out in reality, Leigh. So we published a famous accident that occurred in Australia about 20 years ago, where a guy had a CO2 scrubber problem at 110 metres. He'd been down there about 10 minutes. He became unconscious, and one of Australia's best known technical divers, Dave Appley, was trying to make him bail out. He didn't have a BOV, so he was trying to make him bail out, and he just wouldn't. He was sent to the surface in a buoyant unconscious ascent, which we were sure was going to be fatal. And he actually survived and was treated. I was involved in treating him as well as being on the dive. And he made a full recovery. But when we talked to him later, he said he knew he should bail out, but he was so short of breath that he could not bring himself. He felt that if he took his mouthpiece out for 1 second, he would have drowned. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. But he had a conscious thought that he needed to do it, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. So your point is correct, which is rather than being an issue related to our studies, it's good advertisement for a BOV. That would be my take on it.
A bailout valve, yeah. Okay,
a
thank
bailout valve. Sorry, for those of you who are not rebreather divers, a BOV is a valve that allows you to switch from the rebreather to open circuit without taking the mouthpiece out of your mouth. In other words, having to grab a regulator off a cylinder and stick it in your mouth.
But often that is plumbed into a cylinder that is so small, bailing out from that at depth.
Not on our team, mate.
We're talking seconds, you know?
We use a big cylinder.
Okay.
Talk to me later. I'll tell you how to calculate the volumes. It's quite easy.
That's 2 I owe him now.
No, shut up.
2 I owe him.
That's it. Time over.
Okay, this is for Laura and Leigh. Leigh, I know there is a very good database in England or in the UK for...
It's one question for two?
It's the same basic question.
But that's your last question, but only for one. I'm joking, please.
I'm going to ask it anyway. I've got the mic. But there's a great database in England for wrecks, but it doesn't integrate with anyone else's. Whereas in the Netherlands, there is a good database called MASS, M-A-S-S, and Felipe Castro here in Portugal has the Nautical Archaeological Database. And is there any plan to try to get those coordinated so that everybody can access it through one interface? Same for Italy. I don't know what your plans are for your project per se.
I'm not sure if I can hear that correctly.
Yes, same. There's a bit of echo. I'm not sure I understood the question.
Hang on.
Leigh,
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm sure it will do. The only reason we've got he's talking about a site, a website that anyone can access, and for €30 a year, you get access to all those thousands of shipwrecks that we dive, and you can upload that information. That database is built on surveys that the British government have been doing for decades. Those seas and those shipwrecks that I dive, they come from surveys. The surveys are done for a certain purpose, and that's shipping hazards, military reasons, and oil lines and pipelines. They need to know what's on the seabed before they can do these things. For example, the submarines will go and park themselves next to a big shipwreck, and they'll go undetected through sonar and things like that. Well, that was the theory years ago. He's asking that question, could that database be put around the world? And I'm sure at some stage it probably will. It's a tough job to do, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question. I should do, really. Sorry.
I don't know if you want to add something, Laura?
Well, again, I'm really sorry. I'm not sure if I fully understood the question, but if I understood correctly, it's how, like, where's the database to find, like, the locations of the recs and. Okay. Well, I have to be very honest, during our project, no, that's something that we haven't thought of. But in any case, so in Italy, I think it's like that in pretty much every country. You cannot just like dive and document a wreck without involving at certain stage like local authorities. So they would then, I would say, deal with that part of the military databases and so on.
I think that with the thousands of shipwrecks, I'll be gone for the long sleep, and Laura will be the same age as me and Simon by then.
Okay, so thank you so much, Leigh, Laura, and Simon.